Awesome, thank you. Good morning, happy Thursday. We still haven't figured out a good name for this day as finance, but it just doesn't have the nice alliteration that Finance Fridays
I'm a
had.
big fan of alliteration. We do need to work on that. We should have a committee.
Maybe we should have a committee and maybe a subcommittee. Beyond that, just wanted to note a few things here. Sorry, I'm going to pull up my notes here. One is, I think as Nate emailed out last night, we're deep into kind of process optimization, optimizing the reconcile with Sue Lassard. And from what I could hear yesterday, I mean, she was here almost all day with the team. It was supposed to be just a couple hours, and but she came out of the office, and I was crashing on memos to prepare for the finance committee or for the meeting on Monday, the city council meeting, but wanted to talk to her about updates. We have a meeting next week with Sarah, her, and myself to talk more about her initial findings, but she kind of just mentioned that like the team is enthusiastic, they're engaged, and that's always been a really tough project like this. Just to, I walked in once and everybody was huddled around computers, and so it seems to be going well. I'm looking forward to kind of the report outs on that. There will be sort of an initial set of recommendations that she has that I'm going to discuss with her next week, and then probably report back out to council on what those are, on maybe some initial process changes, some of which could require some ordinance changes, some policy changes internally that we express in writing, just to make the processes flow smoother, so we can, things that Sue is expert in, and we can free up time from our finance staff that right now are things that are being done manually under the idea that they're required, and they may not be required, and there might be better, more transparent, faster optimizations of some of our processes that can free up people to really start digging into more of the high-value work we need to get into. And then she's also, some of them are going to be a little bit more long-term, and still getting into the weeds of the processes so that we can get to that fully reconciled account where we have a real undesignated fund balance, and move forward with, a fully functional and optimized, best-in-class finance department for the city of Ellsworth. We made enormous progress over the last year and a half. I've been reading the stories about Washington County, and the idea of having to float an $11 million bond to pay for what's already
Just to
happened
pay
in the
the
past.
bills, yeah.
Some sort of $7 million short-term loan, and there's some other issues in some other counties, tons of other cities and towns. To me, this is, I never saw this kind of thing in Massachusetts with cities and towns, and I see it happen all the time in Maine. I'm kind of interested in the systemic problems that are happening here, like what is leading to this. It'd be one thing if it was just Ellsworth, or if it was just Washington County, and like, every once in a while these things happen, and a ton of staff turnover, and policies and procedures aren't kept up with, but this seems to be a deeper issue across Maine, so.
And it's small towns and large, which makes it hard to really pinpoint. Is it capacity? There's a lot going on.
Yeah, small towns,
Yeah.
large counties,
Yeah.
cities, so fortunately, I think we're on the upswing, where I've got a clear path for getting us back into perfect, but want to make sure institutionally, too, that this doesn't happen again, so. The other thing, we have an EV charging event to.
Can I stop you
Sure.
just a moment? Last week, during this finance meeting, we heard from the auditor, and we heard from Sue Lassard. My question in this process is Sue Lassard and the auditor on the same page? Or are we training the finance department in a way that is different than what the auditor is suggesting? So I'm wondering if there has been a meeting between them, because there was no dialogue between them here. And I think it would be helpful, before we got too far into this, if there was a meeting between the two, the auditing firm and Sue Lassard, to see, they can disagree, and Sue Lassard can override them, because they're the consultant, she's the consultant. But I just think that it would be wise that if they were 70 or 80% on the same page, that would be beneficial. There's no sense in paying a consultant to create something that the auditors are in disagreement with. And I don't know that they're in disagreement. but I didn't see any dialogue between them.
No, Sue has already met with Ron and his team.
Who has?
Sue Lassard.
Okay.
Yep, so she did meet with Ron and his team, and they are on the same page. Sue has worked with Ron for many years.
Okay.
So, yeah, Sue
Thank
and
you.
Ron are not, they're not new to each other.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, in an ideal world, so Bucksport uses RHR as well.
Okay.
In ideal, we want to be what Bucksport is to RHR, right? I'm sure the RHA loves, like, I don't speak out of turn. Actually, no, I think they said this on one of the calls we had as well. Like, Bucksport comes in, Sue's been there 10 years, like, the fiscal year closes out and Sue sends the information over in exactly the way the auditor needs it. They do some test environments, they check a few things, and the auditor is in and out, like, to make, yep, this checks out, and that's where we want to get to.
I'm glad to hear this. I'm very glad to hear it.
And I think not just talking to Ron himself and that long relationship there, but Sue's also talked to like Tammy, who's who works for Ron, who's the former Madison finance director in Maine, who's excellent and has been working with us for a while. And I think in some ways, I hope that's like one of the central goals, especially in the near term. I mean, we already closed out 2025, so we got to get that audit prepared for RHR, so it's as easy as Bucksport's. Now, granted, that 2025 especially, and so 2024 especially was a very tough year. I was only here 3 months for that kind of finalization. So when I would look at that audit, that's exactly what we walked into. 2025, we were fully in Cassell software, but not optimized to like a Sue Lassard Bucksport level piece. So now that we're in 2025, having her be able to get it as well as we can, and then clean up policies and procedures right now so that 2026, there's really no findings, that everything that's in there, that's like really her main goal is those audit findings that are there. And we have like probably the best person in the business to get our audit RHR-able. And I'd also note too, there is, in that 2024 audit, I think to the tune of maybe $250,000, maybe $300,000, we had paid for accounting services in addition to auditing services from RHR because of turnover in the department, and they couldn't do even like the general servicing of the accounts. So we didn't do that last year. We had our finance teams internally do the reconcile, and now Sue's helping us out. But you can tell with RHR too, as well, like there's a pressure for them. Like our audits have required more of their time than a typical, like a Bucksport audit. But the way the contract is structured, they don't get additional funding. It's just a flat fee. It's not an hourly rate. So I could see, to a small extent too, if we need more coordination, to your point, Steve, on like let's get some more hours potentially with RHR and Sue. If it's going to take a lot of time of Sue taking RHR's time, not just on, here's the data and RHR audit it, but we need some hours from RHR to kind of explain what the problems with our system that they've seen and create a little alignment there. So I might look to a limited contract with RHR on accounting services, not to the tune of $250,000, which is what happened in 2024, but a much more limited engagement because I am amenable to the fact that, we're not at Bucksport yet in terms of here's our data and it's a super easy audit. And I want to get there. This is the last year of the contract with RHR, and there's not a ton of auditing firms in Maine that do this type of work. So if we can get to that level, and maybe RHR would want to re-up with us, or our finances are in such good shape that any auditing firm would be happy to take us because, our accounts are clean and they can come in and do those audits. But and to your point, Steve, maybe there's a little bit more of at a future meeting, kind of how these two are tying together, because and I mean, I can see why that didn't come off at the last meeting when you just have Ron present, Sue present. We only have Ron on the city council meeting, not Sue, just for time's sake, and it's an audit presentation. I think that's okay, but if the council wants Sue there to talk about the other things we're doing, I feel like I can probably voice over just some of our current plans, but.
My feeling is the auditor, I don't like the fact that we're hearing both at the same time. I think we should hear from the auditor. That's who's audited the books. That's who's come up with what have you. Sue can certainly watch that meeting, but hearing from the auditor, that was a lot in one meeting, but at the same time, it was helpful. So I prefer to hear from the auditor.
So maybe we bring Sue back in like October at a council meeting.
do you think she'll have recommendations ready at that point? Not complete, but at least is that the good time for a process update?
I think so, actually. I mean, she's got some specific things in there already that are, changes we could make, but it might be good to come into October. We could have her come into the workshop or finance committee meeting, just because I don't think we want to have like, here's what we're going to vote on this meeting. I think
Right.
it's like, hey, here's some process changes we can make, some the council may like, some the council may like, not quite yet, or I want more information, so, but I think to your point.
Coming back to a finance meeting would probably be beneficial in the beginning.
We'll just maybe mark one of these off as a, let's deep dive on some of the changes that we considered and get council's feedback. I like that. Any other questions before I? EV charging event today at 10 is the official opening here. We're close to $1,000 in revenues on that, so
How much?
close to 1,000. Now, that's revenue, not profit. But that was.
More than we were making at Merrill Park.
Yeah, which was about $7,000 a year and exclusively, and there's just.
In expenses, to be clear.
All expenses
Yeah.
from the city. I'll talk more. Revision's going to be there. Darlings and Stanley are bringing some of their electric vehicles as well to show those off. As the kind of the models that they have, as well as Efficiency Maine will be here as well. We invited our I don't know what I'm saying, our legislative representatives as well. And I know council got an invite too, so glad to be opening that. I think they're doing what we hoped they were doing, which, the previous versions were pretty much full all the time with the same exact cars and, kind of swapping around. Now there's, some of the usual suspects are charging up over there, but I see a lot more tourists and cars that I don't know, and there's capacity for people to be able to charge up here, go downtown, and most importantly.
Yeah, the location is great, and the fact that they're paying for their electricity is very appropriate.
And we've quadrupled capacity on those chargers too, so. And they've only been open a few months. We've got them on Google, thanks to Nate and
Great.
Jason, our IT department, for making sure they're advertised well in there, but, maybe a little bit more. I know Hart Ellsworth is doing kind of a branding, tourism marketing piece for downtown, but marketing more that, hey, you can come down here on your way to the island and charge up your car for a while, visit our restaurants and our shops downtown, and really try to market those maybe a little better for next summer as a nice amenity that we offer here at the city. A few small things, memos I think are out already for next Monday, council meeting. There's a few things we're tabling there. We only got one bidder on the clerk of the works for the Merrill Lane Extension project. So I'm going to kind of, although we got somebody from Bangor that did a late submission on, hey, if it ever opens up back again, it was like $300,000, which is way too much, I think, to oversee that small of a project. And in the near term, by January, we just need a construction road and temporary power is what our developer agreement with the judiciary is. So it's not until 2027 that we have to fully built out. So I'm going to kind of go back to the drawing board on that one. Also, we're closed on the land purchases with Merrill. The Wardwells have given us their piece now that the other two have closed with Adams. So the city is now has fee rights to all those areas at the exact prices that we talked about before. And thank you to LL Bean and Key Bank and the Merrills and Adams and Wardwells for bringing this all together. The road stormwater permit has been submitted to DEP. We should know in about 10 days if they're going to accept the permit by rule. And then I'll probably come back to a workshop in early October with construction timelines on getting that road together. And then lastly, the tax bills are out. They should be arriving in mailboxes already, if not today or tomorrow. With a due date not until, I think it's October 9th is what's on there. So thank you to council for extending the deadline so we didn't have to have bills that get sent out. I apologize again for this not being as early as it should have. Thank you to Sarah and to her teams in code and assessing for, we had twice weekly meetings. We had some consultants brought in. I've learned a lot, just like the budget process. I want to optimize this so it doesn't happen again. So I'll probably be coming back to council with some after-action report recommendations that are a little more detailed on how we're going to make sure that, these bills are sent out a lot earlier next year. And that's it.
Nate?
I'm up. Well, good morning. First of all, I apologize, like I emailed you guys last night about the reports. I will be sure to get those reports out next week. My goal is to have them on the website by Tuesday for citizens in case they're interested in pulling those up. But like I said, we will discuss those next Thursday at the Thriving Thursday Finance meeting, as I have called it.
Good
Just
one.
get that good alliteration, because we are thriving, and we will be thriving.
Nate, can you clarify for
Just
the
to begin-
public the nature of those reports, just for the people here or listening?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give a good synopsis, after the end of the month, so for this month, we'll be looking at July and August for the fiscal year, looking at where we're at this year compared to last year, where we're at compared to the budget, just so we have a good idea, so we can track revenues and expenses. Just gives everyone a good idea of where the money's coming in at, where the money's going out, and anything we need to address moving forward, so we're not obviously blindsided later on in the year. It's good to look at those reports at least once a month. Obviously, you guys look at it once a month, but us finance team, we look at it every day. So we will do that next Thursday, just so everyone's aware. I'll have reports available for everyone to view. I know Charlie brought up the tax bills. I believe I mentioned it last week, but we are going to pull $1 million from the tax anticipation notes. That's why we have it, due to the delay and waiting for the revenue from the tax bills. That's a $3 million TAN, but currently, once we pull that $1 million, we'll have pulled $2 million, so we still have $1 million available. But just so everyone's aware, just to help us until obviously that revenue starts flowing in from the tax bills. I know that's kind of been standard practice in years, but just wanted to reiterate that. I know Charlie also mentioned about Ron Smith and the auditing team presenting on Monday night, so I just wanted to make everyone aware of that, to tune in. Also, if you didn't hear last Thursday's Finance Committee meeting, it's available online. I think it's a good viewing for those in the public, just to get an idea. But like I said, they will be here with the team on Monday night virtually, so I suggest everyone to attend and learn a little bit about the process. And just really quick to follow up on the Sue Lessard thing. First of all, I don't want to speak for Ashley, but it's been great having Sue Lessard here. Most people would say, man, you spent all day training, whatever you want to call it, learning. And it is a whole big process, but Sue Lessard is so knowledgeable, and I do want to thank Charlie just for, obviously reaching out to Sue and for Sue to acknowledge. I know she does this to a lot of cities and towns in Maine, and honestly very grateful to learn a lot from her. And it's exciting just to see the teamwork and the camaraderie between myself, obviously the whole finance team, and then also, IT Nate and Sue McLean, which I think Sue's there. I can't see you, Sue, but it's just nice to see everyone, working together. Excited to learn more and get, like I said, to get the books very auditable, very RH-able, whatever term you want to use, for upcoming audits. So very excited about that. So, like I said, very much looking forward to working with Sue even more. And I also want to mention that I know the warrants, we're doing the digital signatures because they're not available Thursday mornings. I do want to press that, according to Sue, she really needs signatures this afternoon. So when we send out the warrant, you'll see an email this afternoon. We would highly suggest if you can obviously review the warrants, but please sign so we can have that available this afternoon. But that's all I got.
What time do you think those will go out, Nate?
I would assume probably in the 2 to 3 o'clock time frame. The warrant should be ready by 2 to 3 today.
Sure, yeah, no, my son has soccer practice at 4, so if you get
Okay.
anything before that.
I'll push to have it ready as soon as possible. After this meeting, we'll work on getting that done.
And if I could just add too, Nate, especially with that type timeline, when it goes out, if that email can include any highlights of any concerns,
Yes.
well, either the
Absolutely, yeah, I'll make
things
sure
that are
to
unusual.
highlight everything, so
Yeah,
it's not, like I said, I don't want you guys to blindly sign it, I just know that Sue is highly needing those signatures today, so.
okay, I'll add it to my calendar.
And maybe just a process change too with this digital signature. Maybe we send out a text to counselors as well, just so they get,
That would be really handy.
they
a
get pinged an
heads up.
email, but something like this and say, hey, like it's available text as well. I'll get Ashley
Okay.
all the counselors' cell phone numbers for this. So. Yeah, and just to thank you for that, Nate. To me, that's one of the biggest things is like a culture change in the finance department. I think upon arrival with the state of the budget books and other things, there was like hey, there's something wrong here. But there really wasn't, like, nobody was really talking about what was wrong. Nobody was really saying, hey, this is what we've got to do. And to be honest, there was a little bit of hopelessness. In some ways, like the tenor of what I'm hearing is similar to what I hear at the Washington County, like, people talking about that. There's not a lot of specifics. There's not a lot of plan forward. There's not a lot of this. And like Leah yesterday, I mentioned talking to Leah and Deb, our accounts payable, accounts receivable, about some of the process changes Sue's been mentioning, and she pinged me afterwards like, hey, can I see that, the report on some process changes? I want to make some, I'd love to do better, like what's going on. And I mentioned, well, I'm waiting for Sarah to come back. She's on a training this week so that I can show Nate and Ashley that first. They haven't seen it yet before we have the whole team. But everybody's ready. You can tell they want to keep optimizing, keep doing better. I don't think, I've been a part of a lot of government turnovers in my career. I don't think I've seen a culture change that quick in the finance department, which went from a very sort of heads down, not a lot of people talking about what's going on, to a very transparent, open, honest, even at a public level like this, where we want to keep things going. I think I've mentioned before that culture eats strategy for lunch every day. You can have the greatest plans in the world, but if you don't have people around you that are open and willing to change, it can't happen. So thank you to Ashley and Nate and Leah. And
It's nice, it's nice with Deb and Leah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but they're just wanting to learn even more, which makes, I know, my job and Ashley's job so much easier, because they want to look at the report, the audit report, they want to know what we can do, so like we have, meetings in place to kind of discuss things and work on ways that our system can be better, even if it's not on the audit report, we just know that something's not working smoothly, so very excited for the whole team. Like I said, they're all pitching in and going well above 100%.
Yeah, and Sue, our tax collector too, she can tell she's enthusiastic about the work optimizing her tax collection piece. And then, as always, Nate and Jason, our finance team, I think that's one of the initial findings too, is like, why is your IT team so involved in this? And, there's a bit of, they're involved in a lot. And Sue has expertise not just out of finance too, how an entire system works in a city and town. And that's, I love, as I've said before, you do good work, you'll get more work, and hopefully you'll get paid for more work. But there's also a piece of that too, that we don't want to create risk by just having people like IT and like they're so good at almost everything that, we don't want to, put so much on them, that we want to make sure the responsibilities, for finance stay within finance and not have so much dependent on our IT team for helping to build the budget and helping to send out the tax bills and these other pieces. They should own a piece of that, but very process oriented as opposed to people oriented. Anything else from council before maybe we open it up to the public?
I'd like to comment about one thing. IT has two people, and they have been very involved in the budget process since you have been here. And I might add that I don't believe their regular jobs have suffered. I think they've found a way to do their regular job and help other departments, and that's applaudable.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I don't know how they haven't. In some ways, what I'm worried about too is like there's more, right? We don't do any like data tracking for public works as a, how their projects go. And there's data systems for most cities and towns that kind of help run those. Same thing for procurement policies, digital integrations across all of City Hall. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm actually not putting on that are typically in the IT that would lead a digital transformation. So I think, and there's a lot of workload on them. I know, I was actually talking to another department head. We're kind of at the point where we were at with HR, I think 2 budget cycles ago, where I basically said, like, all the city hall was like, Carrie is so swamped that, like, we need support for her. And I think everybody is willing to go to bat. I kind of feel like the department head mentioned that about IT, is like, sometimes people aren't even putting stuff on them because that they may need IT for. I think that's one of the areas I may want to look to expand next cycle and talk with the group about. I also feel like in this TIF reimagining digital infrastructure, I know Steve, but I feel like their digital infrastructure needs upgrading so we can have systems that really track things. And so if somebody walks out the door and they were subject matter expert, and it was all in their head on how a harbor was opened, or how how a budget process works, or how a tax bill gets sent out. Like, it's actually in a digital system that's just like, hey, it's all in here. Here's the manual, here's how you can learn it. Like, we need, as a growing city, we need to get to that level. But that's a pretty big digital transformation that would, and especially considering those guys' expertise, something that's necessary as a growing city, something that's super complicated, but something that under the current bandwidth would be impossible. And I think one of Sue's recommendations too is we have Trio, we have Cassell, we have I think like 3 or 4 other software. What's the other ones that we use a lot in the text?
Government Windows.
Government Window.
I think that's it, right? Trio, Cassell, Government Windows.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's the main ones.
Those are the main.
And how you can have a system that can kind of gather all that data, see it, dashboards. I've been looking into some of that. There's a group called OpenGov that does a lot of this work. And it's like when you see a public works process flow and work assignment and, GIS mapping of all of the backlog for ditching and this and that on a system that the public can be aware of, it's like, oh, that's how a modern city is run. When you see how those work with procurement policies, where how many procurements have we done over the last 3 years? The public could go in there and run a report and see it's all spit out, as opposed to having to do a public records request, all those pieces. Procurement's another big area, I feel like here. I think I was reading some research. If you really optimize your procurement policies, we might be able to get like a 8% savings, on some of these things, and just better product, because in a lot of ways, government is just a pass-through entity to a lot of private sector procurements. And we've had some procurement issues in the past, due to policies and procedures and systems that I also feel like a digital integration could really help with. So, yeah, they're a great team, and I'd like to maximize them more.
How about the public? Anybody have any discussions that they would like to bring up
I do. Is it my turn?
to the podium? Please.
Good morning. My name's Rob McKinney. I'm Ellsworth taxpayer, and I work at Better Homes and Gardens across the street selling real estate. And something came across my desk yesterday, and I had a very busy day, so I didn't really have time to prepare for what I'm going to present to you now. So I'm going to do my best. Sure. Help me through it. Is this a question and answer, or did I state what I want to state here?
I would like to state what you want to state and then let us question you.
Okay.
That-
And you can
anybody
stop me if I'm going too
disagreement?
fast. But, so we had a sale that was supposed to, my business partner, Steve Shelton, had a sale that was supposed to close yesterday in Ellsworth. And it was 223 Neville's Way in Ellsworth, which was listed for $2.75 million. So, right before closing, they pulled the tax prorations, because 25, they had 25 on the listing. But to do the prorations, they had to get the new tax bill, which has come out. So the tax bill on this particular property went from $17,729 in '25, and then increased to $33,808 for '26, which is almost double. The previous year, the taxes on that property went up from $16,747 to $17,729, less than $1,000. So then the next year, it went up whatever, $17-ish thousand. So my business partner called the town and said, why is this? And his answer, which may or may not be correct, or that he got as an answer was, well, when things are being listed, they're taking 90% of the list price as the new assessed value. And in real estate, we set the list price, it's set by the seller. Most sellers want to get more than their property is worth, so they set a very high number. So it just seems like that jump seems like a red flag to me, like the process has gone awry, or, it's not gonna be working. I don't think it's good for Ellsworth, because it says, come, buy a home here, we'll double your taxes. It seems if you did that to every property, and this may not be very popular to state this, but if you reassessed every property like that, put your wish list price out there, take 90%, then we'd be collecting a lot more money. So the mill rate would have to come way down, because it's not your goal to collect as much money as possible. It's, I think you try to meet your budget plus a percentage. So I don't, I haven't read the policy, but can anybody comment on that?
I've got a whole memo I sent to council on this piece of the
Okay.
assessment. Especially because there might be some public watching or others, I can go a little bit deeper into it. This one is frustrating to me too, sir, and it's, we worked really hard as a team in the budget process to get to 2.9% as the increase in overall spending for the city government. After the previous year was like 8%, prior to that, it was like a 17% increase in city government spending. And 2.9% is like a CPI for inflation. So if I had my druthers, we'd be at 2.9% increase for government, and we'd hold all valuations the same and send in a small increase to the mill rate, and it would be a 2.9% increase for everybody, and then that's like predictable. But fortunately or unfortunately, that's like not the way assessments and the property tax distributions go. I'm assuming this property is on the waterfront, is that
It is
correct?
on Green Lake,
Yeah,
yes.
so the reason I'd say I'm assuming that property's in the waterfront is because there's been pretty substantial spike in waterfront prices in Ellsworth. There's actually been a pretty substantial spike in all property valuations in Ellsworth. So, and I think one of the big kind of changes that's happening now in terms of valuation, from 2009 to 2021 in Ellsworth, valuation of all properties went from about 1.24 billion to 1.11 billion. So, in a 12-year period of time, less than around $0.1 billion in increase in valuation. From 2021 to 2026, and you've probably seen this as a real estate person, like valuations have changed dramatically in the city of Ellsworth, and it's the valuation from the city's level has gone from 1.1 billion to 1.8 billion. So that's a $700 million increase in valuation over a 5-year period of time, versus a $0.1 billion increase over a 11-year period of time. So going from like 1% increases in home prices to almost 11% a year. The bulk of that is actually happening on the waterfront. So when the increase in government spending is about 2.9%, but how that gets distributed is really based on assessments. And now the assessor is an agent of the state. I don't get to tell the assessor, like, don't put up waterfront too much, let's dial back so in this budget cycle, and the assessed values, as they're looking at sales prices, we're going from about a 31% increase in residential waterfront properties is what they saw. And as a whole mix, for about 346.7 million of all valuation to 455 million. Now, commercial properties up about 19%, from 479 million to 572 million, and residential non-waterfront property is up about 13%. So that 2.9% then gets kind of bled into the different valuation increases, and that if you're looking to sell your house, that might be great that the valuation's increasing, but you're looking to buy a house, or you live on one of these waterfront properties and it's a multi-generational family, then you never plan to sell, that's not good for you at all. But your house is appreciating at a much higher rate than other areas in Ellsworth, and that's how the tax distribution goes. The mill rate's actually dropped almost 2 full mills, from 17.45 to 15.66. So the tax rate has dropped, but valuations have increased so significantly on the waterfront that they're holding a higher percentage of the tax burden for the overall city. The overall increase in valuation is about 16%. And then there's another piece that if we fall below certain thresholds in the city, in terms of what the state's valuing our properties at and what we're reporting out and we're taxing people, we could actually lose, or we could trigger an automatic revaluation of the entire city. And also we could, if we're not at like the 90% threshold of what the state requires us to value these properties at versus the market rates, it could trigger them. They won't reimburse us as high for the business equipment tax exemption or the homestead exemptions. They can essentially say, your valuations aren't at that 90% threshold, so we're not going to give you as much Betty reimbursement. We're not going to give you as much homestead reimbursement. So in some ways, like we have to keep keeping up with that in order not lose the revenue sharing piece. But so I hate to be long-winded about that, and I know but you also can challenge the valuation if you think that it was inaccurate with the assessor. That's an option available to you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Did the home sell for?
it did not sell.
Did
The
it-
buyer walked away from the contract, which there's nothing in the contract stating he can walk away because the taxes went up.
Did
So
the,
they're going to, there'll be a lawsuit, but it has not closed.
so, but to that point, there was a price agreed to and they walked away from it?
Correct.
Was it within 90% of the listed value?
I can't legally say that
Okay.
because it's not public knowledge until it closes.
Sure.
Because it could still close, they could still make a
Okay.
negotiation, so we have to keep our lips quiet until it actually closes.
Yeah.
Because another party would know what that number is, and they might come in and try to buy it,
Right.
so,
Yeah, no,
because we represent the
understood.
sellers.
No, the reason I asked that and understand the confidentiality is if it's less than 90%, to Charlie's point, they could, if it does close, they could seek a tax abatement. But if it's within the 90% or more,
Mm-hmm.
under state law, that is the range that, we're, as Charlie said, we're required to assess. Otherwise, we lose the business exemption tax, Betty.
I challenge that. Go ahead.
Sure. So anyway, so if it's within 90%, technically the city has followed state law to assess the value of that property in order to, and especially if it sells for 90% or more.
Right.
We got it right, so.
Is there a policy written on the procedure of assessing in Ellsworth?
Yeah, there's a whole, on the website, there's a whole assessed value piece of the website. There's a state process for this as well, and our assessor, our city assessor can take you through those. I don't know if you've talked to Larry yet, or,
I'm sure this is gonna be an ongoing thing for a while to try to figure this out. But, let's say you're a homeowner on a pond and you're thinking, to your wife, hey, maybe we'll sell, we can get a lot of money for our house. So you put it on the market, you get reassessed, your taxes double, but you don't sell because you were asking for a fictitious number that nobody was willing to pay. So like these people, they put it on the market, it didn't sell because of the taxes, but now their taxes are double. So really, I don't think it's good for the industry to do it that way. It seems like they're targeting just the waterfront people.
yeah, and I don't think that, they don't do it for the industry. It's just based on overall sales and for equity amongst the residents and in terms
Right.
of what
And
they
I-
could sell for, so.
I think
Can I
that's a
ask-
good point. When I say industry, I really mean, I'm not like defending us realtors, but, we are supporting our people in our community that want to sell their property. So I should have phrased it that way.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
about me, it's about the homeowners.
Excuse me just a moment. I wanted to react to something that I'm hearing that I don't think is truthful, okay? When Larry was here speaking, he had mentioned, and maybe I am the wrong person here, that when the city's assessment drops below 70%, it triggers a reevaluation, not 90.
Yeah, the Betty and the homestead is the 90. So it's a
Okay.
separate category of,
Okay, but he had clearly told us at another meeting that when we drop below a 70%, it's an automatic.
right. And the 70%, you're right, that's the automatic, that's for the, and that's in my memo as well. That's what triggers the full revaluation. And you've seen some cities and towns, I think Bangor's going through this now, that's what could trigger being like, hey, you just got a 300% increase in your taxes. Because that's why you also want to keep up for it. Now, and this is, like I said, my druthers, if I could wave a magic wand, would be, we just do 2.9% and everybody gets that. But that would, over time, potentially be inequitable. And that could be part of the effect of this, is like, the tax rates on waterfronts are getting so much higher that people start selling lower and the valuations of the waterfront start decreasing. And then the tax rate gets put onto people that have $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 houses in Ellsworth, because waterfront's decreasing in value at a faster rate than the residential is. But the way the system kind of works, it's probably one of the most progressive types of taxes because of that high valuation. If you own a $2.2 million property, that's going to be holding a lot more of the cost of government, especially if it's been rising in value, versus, a $300,000 property here. You're going to hold a lot less of the total amount of the cost of government, so.
Well, I think you hit a good point there on devaluation, because the sellers are selling because their taxes were $17,000 a year, and they thought that was too high.
Yeah.
And then the buyer comes in, and he's not buying because $33,000 is too high. So that will bring the price of this home down.
Yeah, and to me, this, it breaks my heart in some ways too. Like, sure, if, somebody out of state wants to buy a $10 million house or 2.2 or $5 million house, and, they can afford to pay those taxes because they can buy that type of house, I'm not as empathetic there. But a family that's been on Branch Lake for 6 generations, and, they weren't thinking like that this was going to become, Katy National Park would explode,
Right.
all this rentals would come over, everybody wants to be on the lake, and you could live 3 towns up on the lake, but now how are you going to afford that piece? It's almost like forcing somebody out of their property because the taxes have exploded in valuation, even though they have no intent to sell. That's
Right.
like,
So Charlie, I have 2 questions as we're going through, and I think a larger conversation on property tax as a measure for funding municipalities is big, but it's the reality that we're in. The 2 questions to make sure I'm understanding this, is it accurate that if a property is for sale, when we're in the reassessing, they just take 90% of the sales price? Is that happening, and is that the best practice for the points that were made here? And the second question, I've heard it from you before, the really good breakdown on, here's what's happening, percentage increase based on different categories of properties, including commercial. Is that publicly available so that people can understand this is why your taxes are going up differently than your neighbors are or people across town, so that the percentage increase is really important, and then something about why that, of course, waterfront has always been more valuable, and even more so as we're seeing influx of people to Maine.
yeah,
So,
I could publish the memo that I sent to council last week on kind of what it's going to be. It's now public, information.
having that right on the website might be helpful for folks to understand what's going on.
So that folks can see there is, in terms of the valuation, I'd leave that specific question on the 90% and, sale price versus, listed price, those types of things to the city assessor. I'm sorry, I don't know offhand.
I agree that seems to be a less than ideal way to do it, because what it's priced for doesn't mean what it'll sell for. So
Right.
I think that's a valid issue to ask more about.
I think what we're hearing here is a case of sticker shock, and the numbers that he gave us, 1 year, it increased, the taxes increased 6%. And the next year, it increased 91%. I'm talking about the tax bill with the numbers that you talked about. And I think what we're hearing here is how did it double in valuation? And I think the question is, how do we have a smaller jump each year instead of a drastic jump 1 year? I think that's what we're hearing.
100%, and getting this information out, the assessment, like I said, it's an agent, I don't get to decide, hey, I don't like that waterfront assessment, drop it down by 20, I wish I could.
See, I don't think it's about the assessment, though. I think it's about the policy, because, homes in Ellsworth have doubled in value as well. Pre-COVID, you could you could basically say $100 a square foot for an in-town house. Now it's 200 to 250. I sold one recently at 350 a square foot, right in town, little teeny home. So, you know, their values are going up too, very much. I don't know if the numbers are exactly this, you know, the same growth, but to pinpoint just sellers and the new buyers, I think that's not good for a society or a town. You know, if I got a nice camp on green, I want to move down the lake on a different one, sell this one and get this one. I probably won't do that because I know I'm gonna put a big flag up to say double my taxes. So it just seems like it should be more across the board. And I don't think I'm gonna get my answers here today, but I wanted to just kind of put this out there that this is happening.
Yep.
And it's causing some issues in the industry and for people, you know, I say the industry, but for the taxpayers, you know, the current ones and the new ones. You know, we want to welcome people here so they can pay more taxes, so we can get more money to run our town.
Yeah, I'd say the residential non-waterfront is also up 13%, but
Yeah.
the waterfront is at a magnitude so much larger. But to your point, Steve, too, I mean, when we talked to the assessor earlier in the budget cycle in January, February, the estimation was a 5% increase, and that's what we were kind of basing a potential mill rate at. And now we're looking at a total valuation across commercial, residential, and waterfront of 16.27%. So that's a 10%. Now, granted, the final calculations in January are different than they were later on, but at the same time, knowing these pieces 3-4 months ago, I feel like we could have gotten to that point. That's part of my own process changes that, while I don't have influence over this piece, we can ensure that process-wise they get out sooner. I've talked to some consultants that do valuation in other cities and towns, and this is, I think, especially with Maine's real estate market. Maine's seen a lot of valuation increase, and this is, as you mentioned, Nancy, this has come up all over Maine.
And this is the reality, is
Yep.
those increases. So.
And it's, I don't like the disparity and the difference piece. I will say in some ways this is, it's better than the alternative in many ways in terms of valuation increase. At least, it can help. There's a lot of cities and towns that their mill rates, you can kind of see this as a difference between a town that's growing and people are investing in and they're creating value and there's valuation increase in home. At least there is that asset that can sell, as opposed to some cities and towns where their valuations are flat across Maine. Government spending's increasing and the only thing you can do is crank the mill rate and increase people's taxes, but they don't have a property value that's actually increasing in value that's, an asset for them, so.
I think this is an opportunity to talk, again, remind folks about the homestead exemption program, that they have until April 1st to sign up. And I don't remember, I know that it was increased. What amount of your valuation is reduced from taxable assessment if you are a year-round resident? And there used to be a 1 year, you probably know this because it's part of.
Well, it was 25,000.
Yeah,
I think it's
25,000.
gone up, and then also you had to be in that house for a year. Then they may have shifted it to you have to be a Maine resident, so that if you move from town to town, and that may have even been removed, so you get it the first year, I'm not sure. But the homestead exemption, you have to sign up for it, and last year or earlier this year, Larry did a great job of publishing it and making sure that people were aware of it, which a lot of towns don't. But it's another chance to talk about, as you're looking at your property taxes going up for next year by April 1st, make sure that you sign up and make sure that you get that lowering of your assessed value. And that's a way specifically to address year-round residents who
Right,
are seeing the increases that we're looking at.
right.
Just want to thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Well, thanks for hearing me.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you guys brought it up. I'll just finish with this. Our lakefront owners, we think of the person from away coming here that's got lots of money to buy on our lakes. But I think that the majority of the people that live on, our lakes
Yep.
have been there for a long time. And, I hate to see them penalized because they live on a lake and
Yeah.
they have for a long time. I lived on a lake for a long time and, I inherited the property. It was free. And I think there's a lot of people out there like that, so I hate to see them have to sell because, their taxes have gone through the roof, where I think it could be spread out, over, every single taxpayer.
Yeah,
Hopefully I don't get shot when I walk out that door, but.
Well,
To just sum that up, certainly, the way to fix the way to come up with what you're doing and what you're saying is fair increases and stop this doubling your taxes in 1 year. Probably this is a rough set of circumstances, but I think fair evaluations across the board and fair taxation, if there is such a thing across the board, would eliminate this drastic situation. And whether it's, I think if we have an increase, everybody needs to be looked at as opposed to just a few.
That seems fair.
Yeah, I still think we work so hard, right, Steve? And we talked about it on this yo-yo budgeting of sometimes we have a 0% increase for 2 years in city government, then all of a sudden it's 17% increase in the
Right.
CASA, and then it's 8, and then it's 2.9. Let's try to keep it here. But then you do so much work on that, and the valuations change so dramatically, and like a lot of people are super happy because that
'Cause this guy's
$2.2
paying
million is taking more. If you own a $300,000 house, man, you're really not paying much more than last year at all.
It feels like it is a real issue. It has been, again, when I was in the legislature, it would have been 15 years ago. We looked at how to deal with this with the idea of, back then it was oceanfront was where we were seeing it. So the widow who'd lived in her house for 50 years and all of a sudden her house is worth $1 million.
Yeah.
How do you fix that? And then the counterpoint to it was, there are widows living in their homes that aren't worth $1 million. And it's really hard, and it's our overdependence on property tax. Back when we created this, if you had land, you were wealthy. That was a given. If you owned property, you were wealthy. And that isn't true anymore. So it's a huge issue. It's statewide, probably national. But the assessed values show the fair value of these properties. So with that, I have a meeting at 9 o'clock I gotta get home for, so.
Thank you. I mean, and you can, every
Great
individual can
conversation.
challenge their assessment to the
Yeah.
city assessor. So that is an option that's
Yeah,
available
the
to you.
abatement process, but I know we gotta go, but, it's not, I don't think it's the assessment. I think it's picking one group to tax more. That's what I see, I think the
I just
issue
want
is.
to point out, we're not picking a group, we have to keep up with the assessed value.
So is it all sales? Because
Yeah.
there's a home in,
It's all sales.
all listings, right?
I don't know exactly, I'm not the assessor, but that's, the information that they have, right, is what's public information on the value
Right.
of a home. They see as soon as we see the home sell for a price, right, they know, okay, that's what the home was worth.
Or list.
Or well, the
List.
list is, so that's, the point you're raising, I think is a good point. Listing versus selling are two very different numbers.
Right.
And so I don't know what the policy is for the assessors.
Because this one didn't sell, it was only listed.
Yeah. so
But I have a
don't-
home on my street, right across from my home, that's listed for $550,000. And if I was to list that property, I would probably list it for 4.25, and hopefully it would sell in the high threes, maybe over 4. So it's way overpriced. People do it all the time.
Yeah.
We want to get the most for our assets.
I'd leave the detailed question. I'll come back maybe next finance committee with a specific on that.
I
but-
think more than that, the questions that have been raised. Let's have Larry back here next Thursday.
Sure.
To explain the tie between sales, valuations. Hopefully, they're not looking at listings, hopefully they're looking at comps. But let's get some clarity from our assessor next week.
Okay, that sounds
100%, Rob. And we'll make sure Larry's back
Yeah,
and maybe.
and I'll come too and
Yeah.
be more
Let's
prepared.
get some
I really wasn't prepared.
clarification.
No.
No, thank you
I think
for-
we all need to know.
I think you did a pretty good job explaining the situation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have to scoot too.
Anybody else?
But I don't want to.
Steve and I, you can scoot. See if
Yeah, we can listen.
No, I'm done.
Yep. Anybody else want to speak?
I don't want to get that, I'll just say one thing on what Mr. McKinney's talking about. Whatever is happening that Larry's doing, he may not have much say in it. I think who you've got to look at is Bureau of Taxation in Augusta, and the information. I can't hear him.
Oh, if you could be up at the mic. Sorry, Ray. I know.
I don't want to take for time.
Sorry.
Thanks. When Ray used to do finance
Raymond
committee meetings,
Williams.
they were in the city manager's
Basically-
office, and they
and
were.
basically, what I'm saying, you see, everyone's leaving now, and unless they
We're
come
still,
back
we're
in
still,
and
we're
listen,
still on the.
is the people you have to look at for some of these crazy rules, if that's what's happening, that is crazy, because the valuation of the land is supposed to be as of April 1st. And unless that was listed before April 1st, that's way out of control. Even if it was listed on April 1st, what I'm basically saying is, these figures, if that's the procedure, I would suspect that it's not something that the Ellsworth assessor is doing on his own. I think the people in Augusta are doing it, and they are where the problem is. Pure taxation, property tax. And that's all I'm saying right now, because I don't have much more, but I know that Larry has to, basically, he has to do what their rules say.
We need to learn the truth next week.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'd like to see that, there must be a policy written on how the process works, I'd like to see that. You said it's on the website?
Yeah, there's on the website, there's a bunch of assessing information on how the valuation pieces go. I provided a memo to council on this piece, but hearing this too, I think I can publish that. That way you can see the different valuation increases per the assessor on non-residential or commercial, non-waterfront residential versus waterfront. They have those breakdowns in there as well. So yeah, waterfront was at 31%, and non-waterfront was at 13%, and then the commercial was up 19%. And then how those three categories essentially cover the 2.9% increase in the overall levy or cost of government from last year, that's where the distributions change around based on the valuations, so.
91% tax increase, regardless of where we come up with the number. 91% in 1 year is going to cost people their homes in some cases. So we certainly need to learn next week a little bit more about this. Anybody else? And just for the record, I'm going to listen to everybody until you're done talking. I'm not leaving.
Morning, Jared, resident. So, just wanted to take a moment and talk about the opportunities that the city has with this upcoming lease at the Moore Center, and how, if this lease is structured right, it could possibly defer a lot of the cost of the debt services for the building. I feel like the people that are working with this lease are going in the right direction. I feel like they are starting to wrap their heads around it. And I know that, it could pan out to work out well for the tenants and the city and the taxpayers. One thing that I've been kind of pondering is the vacant spaces that are left in the building, and how those vacant spaces, the CAMs will ultimately fall back on the taxpayers, and what we could do to utilize those spaces to make those revenue generating spaces. And looking at the size of those units, I keep coming back to the possibility or the idea of moving the Erkey building program into that space to offset that cost, and then possibly looking forward down the road of renting the building or selling the building. And if we rent it, to basically turn what the lease would be possibly on the Moore Center into just a flat, no money in, no money out, with the offset of the lease down there, or sell it and put the money into the capital budget for capital improvements. But I just want to say that, I feel like the lease is going in a good direction, and I think that it'll work out well for everybody there. The one thing that I would probably suggest, even though, is I would caution on paying bills until the lease is negotiated and re-signed, because that could make lease negotiations later down the road a little bit murky. But
Well, thank you, and thank you for, I talked to Roddy yesterday, and he'd mentioned some great conversations we had, and thank you for the time you've spent on this, and I hope we can continue to, get your guidance. You do this in the private sector, and I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to connect the two of you, just because you have expertise in this category that Roddy and the city doesn't. I'm not pumped about having to take over this lease piece. I don't think governments are the best at this type of thing, because, look at this building. Like, I'm sure you wouldn't treat this building if you owned it the way we've treated it over the last 30 years in terms of investment, but when you're juggling invest in a road elsewhere or invest in not having paint fall apart around your employees, you invest in the roads, and not in repainting your building. But as a private business owner, you probably can't rent that place out if the paint's falling apart. And so I'm always very nervous about having to hold on to these assets and then run them as a government, and are we doing it most efficiently? Because that's just not, in my experience in state government, that was the case too. They just let those buildings fall apart until they're massive capital assets that are so depreciated and require so much investment that they're difficult. So how do we get this one right? I like what you're saying about Erkey too. I think, as you know, we're in a reimagining phase with Erkey. It's another piece that, I wasn't involved in the initial sides of that, but we might have to make some tough choices. And I know the Ellsworth American had an article, an editorial out about potentially looking to, should we consider just sending it out there for a long-term lease to see if somebody would like to operate that and see what comes in for the private sector saying, hey, this is a waterfront property. It could be a great, space that would, be a higher business use than the cost that the cities kind of continue to invest in it. So I like this idea of potentially considering the YMCA as a place to put those lessers in as well. I might look to push on you more on maybe how we're reimagining Erkey and how these two things could combine, because the government holding these assets forever, it's a potential, but maybe we need to cut bait on one so that we can focus on the other and save some funds. That's not, it's not a terrible idea, and I think it should definitely be considered as part of the mix, but ultimately that piece will be up to council too. So, but we got to get them good options.
I definitely think, you cut your debt services on one building, you can make the other one not bleed so bad.
Yeah.
Could you clarify for the record? I'm not sure that everybody knows what a CAM is.
CAM is common area maintenance, so that would consist of all your bills and invoices added up and then divided out by the square footage. And each tenant pays their pro rata share of CAMs, and unvacant spaces therefore would fall back on the landlord to pay their pro rata share of that vacant space. So
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, you guys have a great weekend.
Thank you, Jared. Great.
Anybody else? I guess that's it.
Thank you, everyone.
Could I bend your ear for